Wow, I'm kind of speechless. A degree in archaeology, you have a degree in museum studies. How do those degrees help you in your PhD research when you're approaching these sites and visitor experiences?
I think commercial archaeology must be very, very difficult because of that time and approach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weekend Talk, the show that brings professionals in cultural heritage directly to you. As always, this episode is brought to you by Save Cultural Heritage Group. I'm your host, Megan Komoric, and I am an archaeologist and Egyptologist currently based in London. Today, I am joined by someone who works with English heritage to help create bespoke visitor experiences. With over 400 historic buildings, monuments, and sites within English heritage, this PhD student is integral in the visitor experience and is one of many vital voices helping to tell the stories of English history today. So, without further ado, hello, Hannah. Welcome to Weekend Talk.
Hi, it's lovely to be here.
It's great to have you here. So for you and for those who are watching, basically this show is broken down into 3 segments. We will do introductions where you can tell us all about yourself, followed by a quick Q&A, and then we will play a fun game, hopefully that you like. If not, don't tell me, that will make me sad. No, I'm just kidding. But hopefully the game will be a lot of fun for you and the audience. And then we'll just roll out the red carpet for you to tell us where to find you, any projects you have coming up, and anything else that you would like to promote. Sound good?
Absolutely brilliant. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well then, tell us more about you, Hannah.
So I'm a CDP PhD student. So that means I'm a collaborative doctoral partnership student. So I work with English Heritage and Sheffield Hallam, and we're all funded by AHRC. But it means that I'm supervised by both institutions, which is delightful. The official title of my PhD is shaping bespoke visitor experiences by interpreting the multiplicity of Hadrian's Wall, which sounds a little bit like nonsense. I promise it is not nonsense. Basically, what it's about is new ways of thinking about interpreting complex archaeological sites, because I love Hadrian's Wall. I love my sites on Hadrian's Wall. But for a lot of people, when you go there and you look at it, it's a series of very low stone walls. It's not immediately intelligible or understandable. And it's also got a lot of complex layers that we don't necessarily look at. So a lot of the time when you approach a site like Halstead's Roman fort, which is near Sycamore Gap, which is obviously the most famous bit of the wall, what you'll get an understanding of the Roman history of the fort, but there's all sorts of other interesting things on site. There's a couple of different vassal houses, which are this kind of very, very local bit of architecture that is designed to keep border reivers out. There's a longhouse, there's a suggestion there might have been a monastery. There's all sorts of complex things happening. And it's about how do we communicate all these complex layers of things happening, as well as the Roman things that are actually on display and visible.
That's incredible. I don't think a lot of people necessarily always consider how sites are connected or integrated in with each other, especially just like someone who's just interested in archaeology. They might just think, oh, that's one site, this is the other site, and they're 2 separate instances, where it's really cool to see how you are looking at like everything, the bigger picture, more holistic approach. What brought you to approach it that way?
So that's actually a problem that I'm tackling. So that's the kind of submarine problem, where you go along the wall and you look at a site and you dive back down and keep going. What actually brought me to there is this idea of choreography, which is a way of kind of deprivileging time for an expression of place. So it's quite an antiquarian way of looking at things. And it's about the environment, but it's also about how people live in that environment and how they relate to it. And there's a larger connection to landscape archaeology there, although landscape archaeology isn't necessarily choreographic. And it's about creating eddies in the flow of time in which encounters with ancient objects are linked to contemporary interest. So, for example, one of the objects that I bring up a lot is the Centuriol Stones. So there's this really lovely Centuriol stone in a farmhouse wall. And these are stones that were inscribed maybe every so often along Hadrian's Wall that basically say, this cohort built this. And we don't know exactly what they're for, but a lot of them have been reused and reflipped. So it's that continuing reuse and rethinking that really brought me into thinking about Hadrian's Wall in that way.
That is so cool. Wow, I'm kind of speechless because hearing all of that, it's just there's so much to take into consideration, I guess, when you're looking at these types of sites and these types of artifacts, because one artifact can tell you so much about how a site was used and how it interacted with another site. What would you say was or has been your favorite thing to uncover when it comes to sites interacting with themselves and each other?
So one of my projects has been about trying to connect sites explicitly. So one of the nicest things that I've brought in is some of the nearby priories like Lanercost, which is mostly built with stone from the wall, as are many of the sites around there, which I think is something when you bring it out, it's unexpected to visitors. And I know I keep coming back to where did the stones go, but that's because it's such a common visitor question. Especially, it seems more obvious when you're standing in the middle of Carlisle or Newcastle, which obviously are the big cities at either end. You can kind of point at the castle and be like, that's where the stones went. But less obvious when you're in the middle of nowhere and there's a little bit of wall and it's like, but where did the rest of it go?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how like there's reuse of objects, especially just monuments in general throughout history. I mean, obviously, if we had to, we would take whatever we could find building material wise and repurpose it if it meant less work for us. So it's not hard to believe that other people in the past did the exact same thing. And it's great that it's this mysterious, where did the stones go?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, some of the time it's not actually that mysterious. The wall was a lot taller until the 18th century. And a lot of it's actually the road that you drive along underneath the wall. The wall got pushed over and tarmacked over, and that's where it is.
Oh no.
It's right there.
And that's why your work is so important though, like be able to learn all of these things. Hopefully we don't tarmac over future projects before they've been researched and documented properly, and hopefully we can just prevent the tarmacking altogether.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I mean, obviously the current large levels of building are unveiling some really fascinating things, but obviously along the country, but I'm slightly concerned how fast it's going, of whether things are being done as properly as they should be.
That's always the hard rope to walk on, is like you obviously have to get it done at a decent pace because of funding and other projects that are happening. But of course, you don't want to go too quickly where you've missed something, you've destroyed something that you can no longer get back. And obviously, I don't think many people know how stressful it can be to be in the middle of a trench excavating, and then all of a sudden you've broken through a floor and you just can't get that back.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like I think commercial archaeologies must be very, very difficult because of that time pressure.
Yeah. How would you say, because I know you have a degree in archaeology, you have a degree in museum studies, how do those degrees help you in your PhD research when you're approaching these sites and visitor experiences?
So my undergraduate degree is in classical studies, which has a little bit of archaeology in it, but I try not to pretend to be an archaeologist too much. I'm at the point where I know how archaeology works and I can interpret a dig report, but I wouldn't describe myself as an archaeologist. The classical studies was really helpful just as grounding for the understanding of the wall, and especially in terms of reception studies, as a lot of the things that I'm doing in my work are about the kind of afterlife of the wall. So talking about the ways in which the Victorians responded to the wall and to ways of thinking about empire through the Romans, and various kind of proposals that what if we rebuild the wall to keep the Scots out, to keep the Irish out, which are all very, very interesting. The MA in Museum Studies was absolutely fab though. I did that at Durham, and some of the things it prepared me for are honestly project management, which is the major thing, like getting everything done on time. And I'm sure you've come up against this in planning even creative projects, things have to be done on time, they have to work for the tourist season, or you absolutely miss out on getting any data. I had a bit of a narrow run this year, as I planned one of my projects to go and collect data on the weekend when it bucketed down in 24 hours a month's worth of rain, and I think I got about 6 visitors. So that was a bit of a waste of a visit. But usually it's not quite that bad. The weather up there is usually okay and people are quite hardy, but it can always be a bit of a struggle.
The weather alone in England, because I'm not originally from here, I think a lot of people don't realize just how much it can rain, especially in a single day. And like, how do you prepare for those types of weather events? Like, how do you look at the, say, rain and design that visitor experience around that?
To be honest, some of the time you have to go with things that will work better in dry conditions. Partly it's because I am working with outdoor spaces, which are always going to be vulnerable to weather. But it's also been because of COVID in the last couple of years, and that's what I've been working through. There's been a real push to use paper objects, because paper objects are relatively cheap, they're one use, the visitor can take them away with them and nobody has to touch anything else that somebody else has touched. And obviously visitors have been quite worried about that. But I think as this kind of winds down a bit, we're going to go back to seeing kind of objects that you can hand out and take around with you. So one of the things that I really, really love is there's a interactive at Chester's called Juno, which uses little 3D printed lamps that light up when you put them on various altars, and then prints you off a postcard when you're done with it, to kind of tell you what you've seen and what you're doing. And I love that. I love that narrative interactivity, but also kind of the sturdiness of it. And that's obviously does need a bit of adaptation if you're going to bring it outside, because again, things are more vulnerable out there, and we can't always predict that it's going to be nice and dry. But that's just how things are.
Yeah, you just have to keep rolling with the punches, I guess, as they would say.
That's
But it's nice. It's nice to see that there's these interactive elements of history, especially because I know people, they want to go visit a site, they're going there to get that physical experience. So how, like, if someone was visiting the UK or England, for example, what sites or museums would you recommend for someone who actually wants to like get hands-on with history?
It depends what kind of age groups you're looking at. So on Hadrian's Wall, I would definitely recommend Bud Oswald for bringing kids. The museum there is very, very family orientated, and they do a lot of really, really interesting stuff, helping you physically enact the past and kind of work out what you're doing. Otherwise, in terms of kind of how we look at history and understanding it, I would actually recommend going to Chester's. They have a really interesting museum there, which has been slightly updated, but it's basically an antiquarian museum. It's very much Victorian, lots of displays of stones, and it's interesting from that angle, understanding the history of the wall and how people have thought about it, especially because it's a museum that's been preserved.
Well, that's like the best kind of recommendation I think anyone could have, is someone who is working with this and knows their stuff. So if anyone wants to go check those out, please do, and let us know how that goes, because that would be incredible to hear if any of our viewers actually go and see these things, especially with COVID currently. It can be difficult, I know, for a lot of people to go out and to interact with history. So I guess my other question would be, if for yourself, or like your opinion, if you could create an interactive exhibit either for sites or for a museum object situation, how would you like to create something that's very accessible and diverse for COVID times?
That's a real challenge. So some of the things that I've been working on and ways I've been thinking about this have been through accessing content through bring your own devices. So using QR codes that scan to people's mobile phones and accessing content that way. the touch is the real problem, because that's so much of the way in which we access objects. And it's why I'm so pro replica objects, to be honest. I have some beautiful things, like a Neolithic baby jug that you can only understand once you start using it, because it fits in your hand and it's the way its legs interlock with your fingers. You're like, oh, I can't actually drop this. This design makes sense now. But to look at it, you're just like, oh, this is a cute jug. So it is really, really tough doing it without a sense of touch. And I think bring your own devices are going to be big for the next couple of years, as are going back to paper trails. So one of the things I do love are kind of choose your own adventure games, choose your own adventure books. And I've worked on a couple of different iterations of those. I think those are going to be a way forward, because visitor choice is really, really important, and allowing them to express their interest in what they're actually interested in. Like, do they want to pursue this story about gender, or do they want to find out about this sword? There's all sorts of kind of interesting ways to bring that out, and it encourages learning in a really organic way.
I think there's so much room for us to grow after this pandemic, as you said, to like look at things that can be accessible, because we've now been thrust into a situation where accessibility is at the forefront of the user experience. And it's nice to have objects and it's nice to have locations to visit, but if they're not accessible to everybody and what they're looking to gain from that experience, then there's not necessarily a point, sometimes people would say. So it's great. I think all of those recommendations were spot on, and I do hope that we get to see more of that in English heritage and outside of English heritage. But I guess my final question is basically, what kind of like misconceptions do you think that we should know, that you kind of encounter around what you do, that you would like to kind of clear up for people?
Oh, let me think. So one of the things that I do is I do a lot of illustration for a lot of my projects, and that's great. And I love being paid to make art, but being paid to make art doesn't makes doing the art not as fun. So I just like to clear that up. It is not all fun and games. The other thing is some of the historical misconceptions around the wall. It's not the border between Scotland and England, never has been. And it was not made to keep the Picts out. And those are both quite interesting ways of thinking that we keep bumping up against.
I guess I have one question then, one final question, because that's a good thing that you've mentioned, obviously, the misconceptions with the wall. Is there any resources that you'd recommend for someone to look into if they want to learn more about it?
So I would recommend Hingley's Hadrian's Wall, A Life, as kind of a post-history of the wall. I'd also recommend, if somebody from an archaeological perspective wants to get really deep into it, Collingwood Bruce's Handbook to the Wall, which has been published since the 1860s, and gets very, very deep into every single site, every turret. If you want to know about it, the information is there. And that's all very, very easily accessible to a layman, I think.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, I guess that is a nice segue then into our entertainment section. So we get to play a game, and that's coming up next. All right, so entertainment section. We are going to play a game where I'm going to show you an image, and you're going to have to guess what English heritage site it is. Basically, there are 5 of them. One of them is a bonus round, so do not worry. But I will show you an image and I will give you a clue, and you tell me what site it is, if you can. Obviously, if you don't know, that is completely fine. But if you do, great. And if you know more details about it, then obviously share them. But if not, I have many notes, and we will learn something new here, hopefully.
No, it sounds brilliant.
Excellent. Okay, well then we will show you the first one. And the clue is that this site is the oldest site that English heritage cares for, and it was constructed around 4000 BCE during the early Neolithic period.
Oh, you know, there are so many of those, I'm not sure which one it is.
Do you know what it might be if you don't know the name of it?
I mean, it looks like it is some sort of rock tomb, maybe. No, I'm not sure if it's actually a tomb. Because obviously it's got all the pillars and things going on, always a delight. So it's probably part of a bigger landscape as well, but I can't see that far around it.
That's completely fine. This is called Kit's Cotty House in Kent. And the background says that it's a long burrow, which for those watching is an earthen or dry stone mound flanked by ditches. And they're usually traditionally used as funerary monuments for Britain's early Neolithic farming communities. And then my further notes say, though today it is made up of 3 large unsupported stones, which look like they could probably crush me, when it was first constructed, it would have been buried within a large elongated earthen mound, which was 80 meters in length and 12 to 15 meters in width. Now, some skeptics, such as ancient astronaut theorists, have long questioned stone monoliths like this one, especially when human remains are not found within these sites. Though human remains have yet to be found at Kit's Cotty, it is widely accepted by experts that this is simply due to the preservation conditions on the site, and thus Kit's Cotty is still classified as a historical burial site.
No, brilliant. And for people following along at home, this is where the grave rites in Lord of the Rings come from. They come out of barrows like this.
That is an incredible fun fact. I loved that. That was great. Okay, just bring on more fun facts like this, and I think we're going to have a great show.
Fantastic.
Okay, we'll show you the next one then. And while that image comes up, I'll give you the clue for it. But this site is now the youngest site that English Heritage cares for, and it was used from 1961 to 1991.
Okay, so that is Cold War. So it's probably some sort of scientific testing site or research site. But I'm not sure which one. It could be an observatory, but I don't know.
Well, you definitely got the Cold War perfectly. And it's in York. It's the Cold War bunker. And it says that this bunker was built to house 60 staff and was intended to act as an observation post for monitoring the effects of nuclear fallout in the Yorkshire area. It also says that the interior displays the original communication and monitoring equipment, plus special rooms and a sewage ejector system, very nice, intended to help keep the bunker completely separate from the outside world. And it's also fitted with a remote sensing device known as an atomic weapons detection, recognition, and estimation of yield, which is apparently AWDREY device. It's actually only one of 13 in all of England. So that device is basically being preserved in this site that's also being preserved.
Yeah, I think that's not the only bunker that's owned by a museum. I think, is it the British Museum have a bunker that they keep a lot of things in?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, because very good climatic conditions.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, especially when you know it's built to withstand basically a nuclear fallout. Of course, you're going to want some of your fancier things kind of preserved and tucked away in there.
Equivalent of a good cave.
Exactly. It's the best kind of like hoarder's cave for artifacts. Basically, going back to our Lord of the Rings, it's like where Gollum would have liked to have his ring.
Oh, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, the number 3, this one's a fun image. While it pops up, I'll give you the clue. It says English Heritage has hosted various immersive jousting events, and this photo is taken from a 2016 vlog by English Heritage calling for jousting to be added to the Olympics. What English Heritage site is depicted in the background?
English Heritage has a lot of castles. This could be Warkworth. I think it might actually be Warkworth. Is it Warkworth?
Before I give you the answer, I bet the audience wants to know, are you down for jousting?
Yes, absolutely. I really, really enjoy the modern sport of jousting. I think some of the people who do it are absolutely extraordinary.
It is a lot of fun.
That's it. And to be honest, anybody who can train horses to do that and do it safely, like, I absolutely respect that.
Yeah, I think that it'd be great to see at the Olympics, no matter what castle this is at. I think that 2016 vlog had it perfectly. But this is actually Kenilworth Castle. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the many. I mean, there's
Yeah.
like you said, too many sometimes.
I think English Heritage has about 300. It's absurd.
Out of like the 400 sites they have.
Mhm.
So this says Kenilworth Castle was founded during the Norman conquest of England in the 11th century. This castle is famous for being involved in the revolt of 1773 and 1774, which is a rebellion against Henry II by three of his sons, his wife Eleanor of Antiquaria, Antiquin. Oh gosh.
Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Thank
It'd
you.
be 1273, would it be? Or
I don't know.
1173?
Oh yes, 12-7. Yep. That is my pen smudging.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
There we go. I was like, 1773 seems a bit late.
I know, and I said that, and I was just like, what's on my notes? What? Yeah. Would you like to talk more about the revolt, or if you know any more about it? Because I found that really fascinating.
I don't have a huge amount to say, but I would put in a recommendation for The Lion in Winter, which is a film rendition of a very, very unhappy family based around the same sort of people.
Okay, I will have to check that one out. I've seen bits of it.
Yeah, an absolute delight in the genre of very wealthy families being awful to one another.
Oh, it's always the joy. Excellent. Okay, goodbye jousting. And then here's the final one before our bonus round. This is a longer clue, so I'll start now. But this says that Bram Stoker immortalized these ruins in Dracula, where he writes, "For a moment or two, I could see nothing as the shadow of a cloud obscured St. Mary's Church and all around it. Then, as the cloud passed, I could see the ruins of the abbey coming into view." There's your clue. "And as the edge of a narrow band of light, as sharp as a sword cut, moved along, the church and churchyard became gradually visible. It seemed to me as though something dark stood behind the seat where the white figure shone and bent over it. What was it? Whether a man or beast, I could not tell." And then we'll get the image up real quick. There we go. Yeah, so
fabulous. Yes, this is Whitby
gorgeous.
Abbey. Love
Yes.
Whitby Abbey. Absolutely beautiful site. And obviously St. Hild is really, really fascinating early medieval figure. And also there's a cross somewhere down there related to her. But there's also, if you go through the graveyard, there's some really, really fascinating wear on the gravestones because of the salt water coming off of the ocean. It's really, really unusual how they've weathered and how quickly they've weathered.
That's extraordinary. Like, I know about degradation, I guess, of stone, but it's interesting to see, like, you should probably tell us more about it, but it's interesting to see that in gravestones because you expect it, you're thinking about it on a monument, and then I think we tend to overlook the gravestones. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it means I'm recalling from having seen these a couple of years ago, but I think basically you end up with a build-up because of the salt water underneath the surface that then pushes bits off of it, which leads to them degrading in quite interesting ways. But obviously it also means that any monument up there has quite a short lifespan. And you can see it as well, obviously on the cliffs and inside the abbey on certain parts of the stone that are a bit more vulnerable than others. Because I think quite a lot of it's limestone that's very vulnerable to this.
That was another fun fact. I also have another image I can show you too. They actually put a little plaque up for the Dracula, which I thought was kind of nice. They made sure that people knew, the tourists could know.
Yeah, well, I mean, Whitby, the town itself, sells itself on Dracula and the Goths. But they do have some really, really interesting stuff up there. And like I said, the early medieval history is absolutely fascinating.
It's extraordinary. I think more people should be able to go visit that, hopefully this coming year, as long as COVID kind of calms down.
I mean, fingers crossed. I think this summer should be good. And also a lot of these sites like Whitby, they're outdoors, it's kind of quite minimal risk. rather than, say, all crowding into a tiny local museum. And there are some tiny local museums in Whitby that are fairly good, and I would recommend having a look around and seeing what you can see. But the Abbey itself is beautiful.
It looks gorgeous from what I saw, and is on my list now for the new year. Okay, then we guess we go to our bonus round, and I did warn you about this bonus round, but this one isn't a site necessarily. It's something interesting about the site. So I'll give you the question. That's my wedding. Oh, hello, my husband. So we're actually kind of focusing on the bookshelves behind, but this is Rest Park, English Heritage Site. And the question is that in this library, as you can see with the bookshelves, they are lettered through the alphabet, obviously for placing the books. But there's a mysterious case of a missing J that I noticed. And yeah, the letter J is nowhere to be found in this library. And I had to actually go look through archives and talk to some curators of the site to find out why the J is missing. But with the clue knowing that this is 19th century inspired by old French chateaus, why would you say that a J in a library would be missing?
Is it related to the Jacobites?
A bit, yep.
So it's not one of the Jameses have gone missing. Maybe James II coming back to England. Is that the joke?
There is definitely like one of those is the theory of it. I got so many different theories, and it's interesting to look at. So yeah, that was, if you want to explain that one more, then I'll explain the other one.
Oh, obviously, James II spent and the Jacobites in general spent a lot of time in France, and as France was very heavily allied with Scotland, and kind of, I think some of them kind of just lived their lives out there because they couldn't come back to England for obvious reasons.
Yep, that is the best way to put it. I have another image and it shows what the library used to look like. And while that pops up, the other one that I found was basically also talking about how they might have wanted to replicate like old Italian libraries. And so I and J would have been interchangeable. So they would have the letter I, leave it at that. The J's would go into the I section. And then someone else said the I and J could have also just looked too similar. So they might have just omitted it to lessen confusion. And my husband's theory was that the library was too symmetrical to add J, so they didn't want to add it. But let me get that next image up for you, because I thought it's interesting to see, because you can see the wallpaper at the wedding was green, the carpet was red, but here the carpet is red, the wallpaper is blue. And the fun facts about this place is it was actually used in the World War II as a hospital. So this room was actually stripped down completely, and they would have soldiers here for obviously coming back from war that were injured. So they would use this as a home, obviously, and a hospital. And then recently this site was reconstructed as well. So they did a 20-year restoration project, and I have the final image for that, which just looks really nice. But yes, it was built in 1834 to 39, and you can see it's just massive, and you can definitely tell what they were pulling from when they were building this.
Yes, it does rather look like a chateau, doesn't it?
Very much so.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, it's worth a visit. Like you were saying, obviously outdoor places are really great to visit, and this has 90 acres of gardens, so it's always open to the public. They can go and they can walk around lakes and bridges, and it's a nice place to have a picnic. I highly recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. English Heritage obviously does have a lot of outdoor sites it cares for, and a lot of them are worth looking at. And to put in a final plug for that, there are also a lot of free sites that you can visit that I would recommend looking for, and a lot of them are a stone circle in a field that you can just walk into and take a look around.
That's incredible. Is there any specific one that you would personally like to say someone should go visit?
I can't remember if it belongs to English Heritage, but I'm a big fan of Long Meg and her daughters in Cumbria. who obviously the folklore is that they're witches who were turned to stone for dancing nude on the Sabbath.
Oh, well, there goes my weekend plans. That's incredible. You did great. That was the game.
Brilliant.
And you gave us many more fun facts than I could have ever asked for. So I bow down for that. All right. Well, then I guess the last thing to do is roll out the red carpet for you. So if you could tell the audience where to find you, if you're on social media, if there's any upcoming projects that you have going on, either personally or with English Heritage, or if there's just anything else you would like to promote or shout out, I give you the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can be found at Hannah Tail on Twitter.
That is exciting. Hopefully, obviously, if you guys like this episode, give us a thumbs up. We post here twice a month. So if you want to catch another episode, please subscribe, because I think Hannah could also say we have fun here.
I could say that.
Yes, another endorsement. We're just going to keep collecting those like Pokemon cards. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on the show, and hopefully maybe we could have you back for another episode one day.
This has been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Well, then say goodbye with me, I guess. Bye, everybody.